Everyone, so glad you're here today. You are in a breakout room for discussion about education and the workforce. If you are here by mistake, if you meant to join a different discussion, Ivy's put in all the breakout session links for you, and you can feel free to hop on to another space. We're just excited to see that y'all have stayed after a wonderful event. And just to introduce myself, I'm Pamela Chan. I'm the Associate Director of the Social Policy Institute at WashU. I'm also joined by Ivy Lena, a Research Assistant at SPI, and Ivy will be monitoring the chat and will flag any questions or comments you send there. So today's session, this is not a presentation. We've already had a wonderful series of speakers that gave presentations and a panel with community leaders. Now is the space to have a dialogue. So if you're comfortable, we'd love to see your face by turning on the video. I've got mine on. Nice to see y'all. And of course, this is optional. You can feel free to turn on your video or not. And what we're hoping for today is just to be able to have a conversation, debrief about some of the things that we heard today, particularly around education and training, and then be able to start thinking about what we need in order to shape the future events and policy recommendations to feature in this event series. So that being said, we just want to be able to ensure that we have a safe space for everyone in this dialogue. And so, Ivy, could you go ahead and share your screen with some of the guidance? So we have just a slide here with some of the guidelines that the Academy for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at WashU have helped to put together, and just wanted to put it out there as a way that we might be able to engage with each other. Ivy, are you able to share your screen? You can see a link to the community agreements in the chat. Well, while Ivy's getting that up, if you can take a look at that, I'll read it out to the group. So what we're asking for is that as we're having this dialogue, please be present. It's really helpful to have a conversation when everyone's available and not distracted by other things. We encourage y'all to make space for others as well as take space when you need it, meaning that you feel free to speak up whenever you have something to say, and then kind of monitor yourselves and think about stepping back if you feel like that there might be an opportunity for others to share. We also encourage y'all to speak from your own experience and then speak in the I and not the we, so that it's reflecting your own personal experiences. And then to have just a mindset of what stays here, what is said here stays here, so that we're able to just have a safe space and keep what's talked about confidential. However, please feel free to share lessons learned from here. And so it's just the difference is not disclosing any particular comments that anyone said, but maybe some lessons or general ideas that you take away from today. So the last two suggestions are just to listen to understand and assume good intentions. So do folks have anything else that they would like to add to this? And here, I can share my screen. So this is shown on, here you go. Here's the screen for anyone that wants to see it. Does anyone else have something to add to this that they'd like to make sure that we abide by before we move on? All right, I'm gonna take the silence as kind of note that there's nothing else to add, and I just checked the chat. I haven't seen anything from anyone else. So thank you. We'll just keep to these community agreements as we go into dialogue today. All right. So if there's ever a time that you want to speak during our session today, please feel free to use the unmute button. The unmute button is kind of like raising your hand. We're going to take that as raising your hand. So that'll signal that you want to talk, and I'll be looking for that. or you can feel free to use the chat, like we have that up. So the first thing I want to know is, why are you here? Why are you interested in a conversation about education, workforce, and inclusive growth? So if you can each just put that into the chat, it'll help just to see everyone that's in the group and also get a chance to get some conversation going. So I'll get us started. I'm going to go ahead and put something. Great, thank you so much all for sharing. That's great. Would anyone like to share what they've put into the chat? And feel free to unmute yourself to share, and please share your first name when you speak. All right, let's see. I can kick us off. So for me, education and training is really important. So it's interesting. I actually come more from the workforce as well as asset building space. And from my perspective, I always have been working with folks, after the fact, maybe after they've had training or they're looking for a job. And it seems like that now with the economies is shifting as drastically as it is, the needs of being able to have training that's more readily available and easy for people to access so they can access their jobs seems really important. So that's what drives my interest in education and training. Does anyone else have another motivation for being interested in this conversation? I see there are a lot of former teachers and current people who are working in educational institutions. I'd love to hear from you. Oh, you can't unmute. Let's see. I don't know why this is. Thank you so much. Okay, let's try that. Can you all unmute now?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Siva. I used to volunteer in New York. I was working in Manhattan. There's a program in the New York State called Two Together, where volunteers go and help children from uh, disadvantaged neighborhoods to tutor them in the evenings. And the program provides some snacks and other things for the kids. And they come and learn. A specific objective is set right before starting the year, so that there is a measurable outcome at the end of the year. And the children, so their performance is tracked throughout the year. And this was a very good program. I volunteered there for about 3 years. And personally, I'm from India. There I have seen some affirmative programs from the government, which has helped millions of people to get a free education. And because of that, those people have gone, those who would have probably dropped out of high school or middle school have ended up completing their education right up to the postgraduate level and raising themselves out of poverty. I've seen a lot of that. I used to work in a bank also, where I used to give loans to very poor people, and I've seen the impact that it could have on families, how they can pull themselves out of poverty. And that's the reason that I wanted to come to this program. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. That's great. How about we hear from someone else? Why are you here today?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Go ahead.
Good. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Janelle, and I work at WashU in the Office of Supplier Diversity. And this topic is really interesting to me because we are working on initiatives that will help to grow the workforce around the region. And I want to hear, more about this topic. I know that it's so important, as we work to improve and provide opportunities to young adults and communities. It is a domino effect in so many of the areas that need support, from the ability to secure loans and access to better resources all around. It's just very important. So I'm here just to join in the conversation and get other people's take on why this is so valuable right now.
Thank you. How about we hear from one more person? Why are you here today?
Hello. Hello, my name is Robert Miller. I'm with MasterCard here in St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis, and I think one of the biggest challenges we have with education in the country and also here in St. Louis is the inequality of education. I think every child, regardless if they go to a private school, a public school, I think the education should be equal. They should get the same equal curriculum and education, no matter what school district they grow up in or where they were born. And how do we get there is the biggest challenge. And I know, listening to Tony Neal, some of it is the way these schools are funded, of course, through taxes and through public funding. I would like to see, I know a lot of companies are stepping up, but is there a way that public education can be privately funded to help some of these schools and some of these neighborhoods become the pillar of the neighborhood, if you will, that it's a place where children feel safe to go to, and they know they're going to get a good quality education. And from that, they become leaders of the community, and gives them just unlimited opportunity in their future and in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think education is the foundation to our young leaders in this country and in the St. Louis. And without that foundation, or without that quality education, some of these communities that we're talking about, I mean, they are getting left behind. They're getting left behind because these kids are not getting that education or getting that opportunity to be educated like a child in the county or or a child in a private school.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, or we have to find a way to get education on an equal footing or equal ground.
Well, thank you, Robert, for sharing that. And actually, you have just brought up the first question I have for y'all. So what I'd like to do in today's conversation is start off with reflecting on what is it about today's presentations that stood out to you about education and workforce in St. Louis. So let's hear from a couple of folks on this. Robert just mentioned the inequality in the area, particularly between the city and the county schools. Is there anything else that stood out to folks?
Something that stood out to me was the fact that there are so many great initiatives that are being deployed right now, but it appears to be in a silo, and how that is truly impacting how effective these programs can be across the region. So, that's definitely something that I think we need to talk more about, is how can we connect the good things that are going on in the various communities, so that we can have a broader impact across the region.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Does anyone else want to share what stood out to them about education and workforce in today's presentations?
Dana from MasterCard, and Daryl, I thought you did a fantastic job, by the way. And something said that really hit me, and then I want to share a motivation, Pam. I really believe in the partnership between employers and kind of trainers. I think about Launch Code, for example, as one of those vehicles. And, employers want skilled workers. Workers want to be skilled to have jobs. And, there's a vortex where we're not really making those connections. And I feel like doubling down on that would be a really powerful thing. So that really stood out to me in your remarks, Daryl. So thank you for that. And, you know, Pam, I can't have a conversation without talking about STEM being so important, and particularly being important in, you know, an underprivileged place. You know, I very much worry about the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and the advances of technology, perhaps, you know, inadvertently being a catalyst to that, and people not having access to that. And I feel like it's so important to train our kids and beyond, really, for STEM. And you know, I like the T in STEM, the technology part of that, just being where I am in MasterCard. But so I feel like that's an important motivation, that we've got to get more STEM education out there and more people in STEM.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, I think something that would be nice is just to see around the room. If you look on the bottom of your screen, you should have reactions. If you could just give a thumbs up to respond to my question, that'll help. How many people here were educated in St. Louis for like their primary to secondary schooling, went through some sort of schooling in St. Louis? So we've got 3, 4. Okay, so we've got about a little less than half of us. Would you guys like to share a little bit about what your experiences were in school in the area, and you know how things might be different now or similar?
I had a great experience in the public schools coming up. It's funny you should ask that question, because I was talking to my wife a couple of nights ago, and I said, you know, I had a great childhood and a great educational experience until I got to my first year in college. And it made me find out how deficient I was, because a lot of the other students from, I guess, more influential school districts, from wherever they came from, got a lot more than I did. And it's a twofold reason. It has to come back to what you put into it as well as what's offered to you. And I think if we offer enough, more will take advantage of it. I certainly would have. But that, you know, I had a good education, but I really noticed the difference when I went to college. And that's just a matter of fact. And I've always said that, and I've said that to my sons: get as much as you can from elementary, from high school, so that when you get to college, you won't have to play catch up with the rest of those who come from other places. But and just a quick blurb on the STEM, I think that Dana was talking about. I think it's very important that we invest in STEM education. We're talking about trying to find companies, and I'm glad to hear MasterCard is one of them. And hopefully, Dana, we can have a conversation about how we can collaborate in education with MasterCard. But we are also talking to as many companies that we can about STEM education. It's really going to take everybody putting their resource together. I don't know how many times I can say that. These silos, these walls, they must come down. You know, I to sound like what president was said, bring these walls down. I think it was Ronald Reagan. We have to bring walls down, because what they're doing is they are really hurting. They're hurting our young, they're hurting our community, and we're holding on to things that we shouldn't be holding on to. Again, there's not one single agency that has all the answers, not one single company, not one single anything that has all of the answers. So I welcome collaboration. I welcome putting our resources together, coming up with some of the answers. So that's why this panel discussion was so well timed, because this is the time that we can do some of those things. That's the one thing that COVID affords us to do, is to pivot and recreate and then put it back out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. Would someone else like to share about their personal experience and having lived through education in the St. Louis area?
I'm also a St. Louis public school baby from St. Louis. So I own in North County, actually up in Florissant, Ferguson district is where I grew up. I also enjoyed my education. I feel like it was a good education, a solid education. But one thing I really learned, and perhaps it was later in life, I was lucky enough when I was in high school to be exposed to a computer. Like, I know that sounds funny, and I'm sharing my age here, but somebody wheeled in a computer, like they weren't around us like they are now everywhere, but they wheeled in a computer, and research shows, this is the part I learned later in life, research shows that just being exposed to something like that, I talk about a computer, but it could be anything, some advanced technology, some advanced skill, some capability. Exposure early changes your life. It has a high correlation to success in later years. That you got early exposure and indoctrination to, in my case, I'm sharing a computer and technology stuff. So I feel like that comes with investment, right? It kind of links to me the investment, and I felt like the panel, the whole kind of categories, themes that we talked about today, I see this sort of cycle in my head, like you have to have a strong maintain strong property values so that you can have a high property tax rate, so that you can have high investment in your schools, so that you can have high exposure to the right skills and tools and capabilities for our people. There's like a relationship between all these things. I guess the trick is get the order of events proper so that the flywheel goes on its own. But anyway, I had a great public school experience, and I feel like the investment in schools is a very, very key component of continuing, a strong workforce, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So for everyone here, I think this is really great. Would you guys mind if we go until just 2:20 to finish up this conversation? There are just 2 questions. I'd really love to just go around and hear from you all. If you all could just take an opportunity to speak up before we close out, is to answer either. One, what do you think needs to be offered in St. Louis? This has come up a couple of times about gaps, silos, and maybe need for STEM. And then 2, what is a really great practice to lift up? Sorry for that typo, to lift up that's happening in St. Louis. So if you guys could each just do one round around the table just to share this, and then we'll close out.
I can speak briefly just to some of what's been said with regard to equity in public education. I think one thing that's maybe missing from this conversation that's an ongoing concern of mine is the role that charter schools play in the public education conversation. There's been some recent incidents in St. Louis of charter schools essentially closing or at least being sort of identified for some, questionable practices. And I think that the model of charters, has maybe lost its way a little bit in terms of being theoretically like an opportunity to experiment with improved models of education under the public umbrella and having received public funding. I think it's extremely important that we keep charter schools equally accountable, and that we find new ways to redirect the resources that charters have, and maybe some of their successes back into the traditional public school system. Because as it is now, it seems like they're sort of siphoning valuable resources, including the workforce. I think the way that this conversation is connecting education and the workforce is interesting, because I think as I see it, one of the problems with charters is that they are also recruiting a lot of talented teachers because of their resources, and those teachers are being directed away from traditional public schools, which I think is a problem. So I think, you know, maybe something that could be offered or as a good practice would be more open channels of collaboration and communication from being directed like from within charter schools back out to traditional public schools and the traditional public school district. I think that the more we can all sort of keep charters accountable in that regard, the better our public schools will be overall.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Would anyone else like to respond to those two questions? All right.
This is Karen. I work for MasterCard, and I'm also a former teacher. And I would say it probably would be helpful to be looking at where things are working better. And I think part of it is an acknowledgement within the educational system that there are students that have fallen behind and taking steps to get them back up to speed. And one of the school districts that does a particularly good job in the county is Pattonville School District. And it's not, I did quite a bit of substitute teaching for them, but they evaluate their students, they test their students. If they are behind, they give them supplemental activities, supplemental coursework to try to bring them up to speed. And I think that's very important because it's not something that people want to talk about, but when they are behind, you need to try to get them caught up. The other thing is it's not just a question from my perspective of having enough funding or not having enough funding. The funding is important, but there are other subtle things at play besides that, such as, for example, if you have parents that hate school and convey that to their students and their students hate school, you just perpetuate that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
If you have parents that are single parents that had their first baby when they were 13 or 14, and that cycle is being repeated over and over and over again, that is a really negative cycle and it's hard to break. And when I was a teacher, I saw that all the time. And I would, as a matter of fact, I would have conferences with grandparents who were younger than I was, who had had their first baby at 13 or 14. Their daughter did the same, and now they were there representing their grandchild. So there are a lot of different systematic things at play here, and it's not just one single solution or whatever. It's going to take a very holistic approach with a lot more support and a lot more money targeted to support students and to help them improve.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing both the opportunities as well as school district that's got some really great practices. Would anyone else like to share? I saw there's a comment in the chat about preventing the drop-off of students and providing after-school supports to students and materials. How about we take one more reflection before we head off?
Well, Pam, it's Dana again, and you know, I believe like a chicken in every pot, everybody needs connectivity. Whether you're a kid, whether you're an adult, I feel like that's a foundational element. It should be a citizen's right to have connectivity, to get training for the workforce, to get, school. Look at COVID and online school. Our new norm is not where we used to be. It's not going to be these gathering places. And so I feel like that's a very fundamental thing that needs to happen. I'm sure there are schools, some schools are really doing a great job of that. Other schools are struggling with that, and communities and places. So I feel like a chicken in every pot with connectivity is important.
Thank you. All right. Well, I just thank you all for your time today. This was a really wonderful conversation for me. You guys certainly brought up lots of topics that I, was helpful for illuminating for me to learn about related to education and training here in the St. Louis region. I know we've been taking notes and paying attention to some of the topics that you brought up, such as the challenges, silos, and need for collaboration, sharing of resources. lifting us best practices. And so something I just want to invite y'all, since I see so many people who are involved in education in the area, is that, you know, we will have, excuse me, we will be having a deeper dive into education and training later on in the series. So if you all have a topic or a speaker idea related to this topic that you'd like to recommend for that session, please feel free to email the Social Policy Institute, and I put the email into the chat there. All right. Well, I appreciate your time today and staying after to have this conversation. And I want to wish everyone a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.